Hey, welcome into Sports Bet. Betting Insight today, Pauly and Teddy. Wednesday, September 27th, big game breakdown. We got four good football games on Friday. We'll hit Texas, Iowa State, which is tomorrow, and then Miami, Duke, and USC, Washington State. What a doubleheader on ESPN. We get to those three games coming up and play of the day before we get out of here. Bad beats, bad bets, bet for the books short. We'll do that in a second. By the time you watch this, Rick Pitino could be fired. Talked to Pat Forde, Yahoo Sports today. He's in Louisville. He thinks Pitino is going to be gone today. Pitino told his staff in a meeting he thinks it's coming soon. This could be the biggest college sports story of our lifetime. As you know, what's going to happen when all these guys that were indicted decide to flip and sing? As you had 10 people arrested, the feds aren't messing around here. Big name programs as well as paying players, shoe companies chipping in, steering players because of the shoe companies to certain universities. This is ugly, Teddy. Pay for play scheme.
Yeah, and again, it's no surprise to anyone that follows college basketball. What is a surprise, I guess, is how much the U.S. Attorney's Office has investigated this, because there's a lot of coaches out there and a lot of programs that are biting their fingernails this morning. No question about it. Now, obviously, what happened yesterday with the assistant coaches at Arizona, Auburn, Oklahoma State, and USC, all of whom have been arrested and accused of taking cash bribes, including former NBA star Chuck Person at Auburn. And I love the quotes. I love the quote from Auburn. This morning's news is shocking. We are committed to playing by the rules, and that's what we expect from our coaches. I almost fell out of my seat laughing for that one. Of course, Person suspended without pay, effective immediately. But the Auburn, gambling? Oh, heavens no. It really is a situation where there's a lot of guys that are going to be sweating. And in terms of repercussions for bettors, Pauly, well, we'll get to that as we move into college hoops coverage. But the bottom line, when you talk about Pitino, and of course, his quote, "These allegations come as a complete shock to me." Pitino doesn't get a "I didn't know" defense a second time. He used that one up already.
Exactly right. How many Adidas schools could be impacted if the director of global sports marketing, the Gatto character, tells all? And also Merrill Code, another Adidas employee arrested and charged via the FBI probe, as a veteran of the Nike grassroots before moving to Adidas. One source said he's the key. No one's talking about it. He knows where the bodies are buried at Nike and Adidas. This could be ugly here. This is going to get a lot worse, as they said yesterday. We have your playbook. One of the guys actually said that from the feds during the press conference. Mercy. More to follow. More to come with that fallout in a second. How about from yesterday's Washington Post? For the first time, majority of Americans approve of legalizing sports betting.
Yeah. We got to get that graphic up there. Show what we got, because this is a big deal, okay? When we talk about what's happened culturally in the United States over the course of the last 25 years, Pauly, you've seen it, I've seen it. This poll proves it. Look at that disapproval rate, from 56% in 1993 down to 33% today. That's moving in the right direction. And it also is something where, when you look at what's going on in terms of the legalization standpoint right now, look at the quote from Daniel Wallach, the sports gaming law expert. Quote, "Literally, we're at the 1 yard line and it's first and goal." That's how close it is. When a newspaper like the Washington Post comes out with a survey like this, people pay attention. The attitudes have changed in this country. The paradigm has shifted in this country. And when it's a front page story, again, it's not like sports betting legislation is right here and people are just waiting for the president to sign something. Certainly the chips are falling in the right places, and there's more momentum for this than at any time that I've seen since I've been in Las Vegas. And obviously Daniel Wallach agrees with that assessment.
Yeah, Illegal Sports Report, the tweet at LSP Report on Twitter. More than 30 states would legalize sports betting by 2023 if the federal ban ends. And Wallach also said, he tweeted back at that, agreed, would take off when several states legalize, more would follow suit. Irreversible momentum, as they say. Great stuff there. All right. Bad beats, bad bets, bet for the books in a second, although it's short but sweet. Not a lot of people got involved with the markets yesterday, which was strange. Early week line movers, NFL, Thursday night game, money for the Bears against the Packers. And this makes sense with the London game, money for the Saints because the Dolphins, not only do they look horrible against the Jets, but remember, because of Irma, they flew out to L.A., then back to New York, and now they're going to London.
Yeah, every move we're going to talk about here for the NFL early week line movers, it makes sense just from a what's going on perspective. You look at the Bears in Green Bay. Well, why is the money coming from the Bears? Because the Packers injury report's brutal. Look at their offensive line. It's in shambles right now. Saints, Dolphins. You look at the situation for Miami. This is a team, as you mentioned, affected by the hurricane. They haven't been home for any stretch of time in more than a month. That matters. Obviously, the next one, the Rams and the Cowboys with the money coming in on L.A. What does that have to do with? That's Dallas defensive injuries. The money for the Steelers coming in against Baltimore. What does that have to do with? That's the Ravens offensive line and their ugly-looking injury report. And, of course, the money coming on the Giants against the Bucks, that too injury-related. Tampa's defense, it's not pretty. In fact, they might have the ugliest defensive injury report of any team in the NFL. Hence, money coming for the 0-3 Giants even after a heartbreaking loss in Philadelphia.
It's also a bad spot for the Cowboys. Shame on the league for doing this. Cowboys played Monday night on the West Coast, and the Rams played the Thursday night game. So they have an extended time off, and the Cowboys are on a short week. Bad bets. This is funny. 2 days ago, the Phillies, 70-cent move and lost, 40-cent move on the Nationals because Harper came back, and they lost 4-1 to the Phillies. The Phillies will not lose 100 games.
Yeah, and the markets, they're playing an expensive game of zigzag in this series. They got burned bucking that weak Nationals lineup on Monday with everybody sitting. Then they shifted gears last night, and Washington managed only 6 base runners in that contest. So burned back in the Phillies, burned back in the Nats. Yeah, that's an expensive zigzag for bettors in this series. A bad bet for those who had Washington.
And the Reds, how about this? They took money. The guy they threw yesterday, McGuire, was making his first start. Brewers needed the game. They're in the race, 175 down to 150. Brewers win 7-6.
Yeah, it was a real head-scratcher, Pauly. I don't understand the move. It was certainly an unusual move for the markets to back a non-contender against a team that's still fighting for the wild card. The Brewers, as you mentioned, only 1.5 games back. Then what'd they do? They scored 4 runs in the first and never trailed. The Reds climbed back into the game. It wasn't enough. Cincy took the money. Cincy lost wire to wire. That was a bad bet for those who had the Reds.
All right, play of the day loser as well. Cubs took money. They were the dog, went off the favorite. Cubs, Madden sat a lot of people. They didn't play Baez. There was a huge error in the first inning that led to 2 St. Louis runs. Cubs lost by a run in that one as well. Arrieta struggled but didn't get help. Let down by his defense as well. Up next, big game breakdown, Texas and Iowa State on Thursday. And then we get to the marquee doubleheader on ESPN Friday with Miami and Duke and USC and Washington State on SportsBet. Betting Insight today on SBRPicks.com.
Go to SBROdds.com. Browse, compare, and shop live odds available at top online sportsbooks.
Back on SportsBet, Pauly and Teddy, Betting Insight today. As always, big game breakdown, sponsored and powered by BetOnline. Check out the bonus page, sportsbookreview.com, for the latest and best offers. To open a new account today, Thursday, ESPN, Texas and Iowa State. Texas 63.5 on the road. Herman quiet on who's going to start at QB. Is Bouchel back? He's not saying. They put Engler in there. A trial by fire at USC. Made some mistakes, interceptions early. Then the kid had a terrific drive when he took him down the field. Almost won the game. Should have won the game. He had the big fumble inside the 2 in overtime, and USC won by 3. What's going on with the offensive line?
There's no question that Tom Herman's got a QB dilemma in this ballgame, but the real issue is what's going to happen with the Texas Longhorns on the offensive line, because they've got injuries on offensive line and at tight end. Their blocking schemes a little bit questionable for this ballgame. Who's missing? Well, let's see. You have Connor Williams out on the offensive line, Patrick Hudson out on the OL, Elijah Rodriguez out on the OL. The tight ends, Andrew Beck's not going to play. Garrett Gray's a question mark. Tom Herman's noticeably concerned about this. Quote, "We've got to figure out ways to do things that they're able to do and not ask them to do too much, because they're not Connor Williams and they're not Andrew Beck, not right now." This is an offense, Pauly, that's going to start 6 sophomores or freshmen tonight. Or I should say on Thursday night. It is a very, very young Texas team, and a Texas team that's been good in the underdog role We have not seen them have similar success as chalk
No.
so far this season, and that's fairly typical of what we've seen from Tom Herman in years past at Houston when he was the head coach of the Cougars.
Iowa State knows who their guy is at quarterback and running back, but is there enough depth the rest of the place, everywhere else, Park, 8 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, 8.2 yards per pass. Montgomery, 321 yards, 5.7 yards per rush. They're taking care of the ball, only 2 turnovers on the season. They should be 3-0. They missed that breakthrough game against Iowa at home where Iowa scored late to tie it, and then they lost in overtime in that game. Could have been a program changer, a big win for that program. Here's the head coach Campbell on not being able to win that game. Number 1, getting ourselves back to fundamentals and details. What do we learn about ourselves in the first 3 weeks that were positive and negative? How can we build on that on both sides of the ball? Number 2, can we attack those fundamentals and details in practice? And number 3, can we prepare for an opponent like that's coming in here that's great talent on both sides of the ball? More good news with an injury update that it looks like they're okay on that front as opposed to Texas.
Well, yeah, Iowa State getting a couple of key guys back to practice from their secondary. The senior cornerback, Kamari Cotton-Moya, the senior safety, or the starting safety, DeAndre Payne. Both those guys have been dealing. Moya had an elbow injury. Payne had a hamstring injury, and both those guys have been out. They've both practiced during the bye week, although in a limited capacity, and we could see that Iowa State getting some reinforcements for their secondary back on the field for this matchup on Thursday night.
All right. You like the dog?
It's a hard game for me. It really is. You know, my gut reaction is I want to be on Texas, but I don't know this week, not with the injuries they have on the OL and not with the youth that they're bringing into Ames on Thursday night, I should say.
Up next, big game breakdown continues with the excellent doubleheader Friday on ESPN. Miami and Duke and USC and Washington up next, and the play of the day comes from Miami game on SportsBit. Betting Insight today on SBRPicks.com.
Research before you bet. Be sure to check out SBR Picks for the best game predictions, breakdowns, and much, much more.
Wrapping up on SportsBit, big game breakdown rolls on. Always sponsored and powered by BetOnline. Miami, the first game of the doubleheader on ESPN. Miami is 6.5, 56 at Duke at BetOnline. Fundamentally sound under Cutcliffe, a terrific coach. Look at this, plus 120 snaps through the first 4 games, an average of 7 extra plays per quarter, and plus 5 in the turnover battle. They'll be starting the same lineup for the 5th straight game, and the key has been the ball control on offense. Jones, the quarterback, only 6.5 yards per attempt, but they keep the chains moving. They have 2 running backs over 300 yards already. They had that blowout win against Northwestern. They beat Baylor, and they had the big win against North Carolina as well. And you see the running backs, Wilson, 349 yards, 5.9 yards per attempt. Brown, 325 yards, 6.3. He hasn't been able to make up the talent gap in this series. 1-8 straight up and 3-6 ATS. 6 of the wins by 12 or more. But Duke can hang in this one as they've given Miami fits the last 2 meetings here.
Yeah,
Duke.
I mean, the very first thing you said, Paulie, I want to emphasize this for a minute. They're plus 120 snaps through 4 games, an average of 7 extra plays per quarter so far. You understand? Per quarter. So this ball control offense with the 2 running backs, Wilson and Brown, just grinding out yards on the ground. And both of them, 5.9 yards per attempt, 6.3 yards per attempt. They're grinding out chunks of yardage on the ground. You have a QB in Daniel Jones. Again, they're not going to make a bunch of plays downfield, but the chains keep on moving. It's a high completion percentage type of offense where they're going to have easy, safe throws for Jones to make. Now, defensively, I might have been more impressed with Duke than any. I mean, this is the most athletic defense that Cutcliffe has had since he's been there. It is a very young defense. They start 5 sophomores or freshmen, and all 11 second-teamers are sophomores or freshmen. So that is a really young defense, but it has talent. And Duke, certainly from a point spread perspective, they've been overachievers so far this season. You talked about the issues that Duke has had matching up with Miami. 1-8 straight up, 3-6 ATS, but the last couple of trips for the Hurricanes into Durham, Duke's been able to hang pretty tough with them with a straight up win and a 3-point loss on this home field.
Yeah, Duke, one of the best in the country at points per game, ATS, what they've done so far. Now, is Miami ready for this road challenge? They got Bethune-Cookman and Toledo at home, which is, I was impressed with what they did last week. Because just look what happened to Florida State. You're talking about starting the season over again with 3 weeks off because the Florida State and Arkansas State games were canceled. So they had the walkover against Bethune, and then they took out Toledo. Rick, do I think we're in as good a shape as we would have been if we didn't have the layoff? Probably not. But the good news is we have more time to continue to get in condition. The game's going to be an evening game in a climate that's not the heat and humidity that we're used to playing in. I think that ought to help. Rozier, one career road start at quarterback, happened to be at Duke in the 30-27 win in 2015. That was the crazy lateral game when Miami should have lost. The kid's knee was down. That game was crazy. 20-29, 272, and 2 touchdowns. Only played in 3 games last year with 4 pass attempts. They could also fall back on Walton. 1,000 yards, 14 touchdowns as well. He's got 3 touchdowns this year, including an 80-yard run. Again, I was very impressed with what they did against Toledo, Teddy, because you saw other teams like Florida State struggle in that spot after the long layoff.
No question, but in Miami, like most of the teams that had the layoff, they played a little bit sluggish in the first half. What the Hurricanes were able to do that a team like Florida State perhaps wasn't, was take over the game in the second half. Now, some of that may have been Toledo wearing down in the heat and humidity after playing a wild game against Tulsa the previous week, but certainly positive signs for a Miami team that a lot of people here in Las Vegas were very, very high on coming into the season. And Duke wasn't that way coming to the campaign. Duke was expected to be a second, not even a second-tier contender. You know, will the Blue Devils reach bowl eligibility was the question for Duke. So when you talk about how are these two teams power rated now, we know that Miami has a broad following in the markets. This was a hot team in August and over the summer months here in Vegas. And the fact that they came through in the second half last week and blew out Toledo only cements that opinion in the markets. Whereas Duke, I mean, we saw the money pour in against Duke last week against North Carolina. And the early money certainly hasn't been on Duke in this game either. Market's a lot hotter on the Miami side than they are on the Blue Devil side of the equation. We'll get back to this game when it comes to play of the day time.
Here we go. What a monster. Top 5 against top 20. USC on the road against Washington State, 7:30 Pacific, ESPN Friday night. Bet online, USC 64.5, a lot of 3.5s out there. This is the first time the Trojans have played the Cougars with Helton as the head coach and Pendergast as a defensive coordinator. You got Falk with all the experience. It's actually worked out that Leach benched him because he didn't like how he was playing early on. Over 600 career pass attempts with over 12,000 yards and 103 touchdowns. He's seen it all. He also has young talent around him. You got Williams, the running back, 4 yards per carry. Mack is third on the team with 24 catches, and Bell, 14 catches at 16.3 per reception. But here's what concerns me. Number 1, the talent gap. And number 2, Washington State. I like the Pirate, and they have a good team, but they haven't played anybody. And how bad does that 21-point deficit look at home against a reeling Boise State when they get the miracle win in triple overtime?
Well, you can't say they didn't play anyone when they played Boise. I mean, Boise's not USC, but Boise's at least someone. This isn't a team that played, Georgia State and Bethune-Cookman over the first month of the campaign. And let's not forget about how much Mike Leach wants this game. He's been game planning for USC since spring practice. All right, literally. And this is one time where we have a very creative coach where he can legitimately bring out his full playbook for one ball game. You talk about Luke Falk, one minor, I'm not going to call it a typo. He said his 600 career pass attempts. He has 1,689 career pass attempts as a college QB. All right, that's a lot of experience. A guy who's been around the block, not once, not twice, not 3 times, 4 times. You talked about all that talent, you know, the sophomore running back in Williams, the sophomore wide receiver in Johnson Mack, the freshman wide receiver in Renard Bell. So it's a Cougars squad that, yeah, they're not going to match up and be able to and bang with USC in terms of the trenches. But schematically, Washington State, I wouldn't be surprised at all if Mike Leach has a few tricks up his sleeve. This might be a fun game to watch.
Well, they have one of the best quarterbacks in college football. Darnold struggling with a couple interceptions early. Now they got issues, though. Jones is going to try to play. If he can't go or leaves early with an injury, it'll be a big dose of Carr. But their 1-2 punch of Jones and Carr, some of the best in college football. Burnett is questionable, yet to practice because of his shoulder injury. He's terrific. He had the one-handed catch against Stanford and had a monster game there. He's got 462 and 5 touchdowns. Mitchell has got 14 catches for 2 touchdowns as well. He was banged up in the Texas game. Doesn't look like he's going to go. So between all these injuries, if Burnett can't go and Mitchell's not there and Jones, that's where the injuries could come back to bite him. But what's strange is I think USC takes the field knowing we'll be fine. We're going to win. We're much the best here and have too much talent. I think they did it against Western Michigan and they did it against Texas. They brought their A game against Stanford and they played their best game of the season. They also played a terrific second half in the win against Cal. So it's their second road game. Washington State here, strange scheduling spot where every game's been at home.
Yeah, and it's not a good spot, per se, for USC. Look at the quote from Clay Helton talking about the back-to-back road games and then having to travel on a short week. Quote, "We're really controlled by TV. We're a TV market business and an entertainment business. So you only worry about the things you can control." But when you're talking about, and you say Darnold's thrown a couple of interceptions. Darnold's thrown 7 picks already this season. All right.
A lot of
his
them
receivers all banged up. And Deontay Burnett, he hasn't practiced. Mitchell hasn't practiced. So the top 2 receivers are both hurt. Who do they have behind them? You have the freshman Tyler Vaughns. You have the junior Jalen Green. That duo has combined 14 catches, 133 yards, no touchdowns. I don't worry at all about the Jones injury. What's he got? 50 rushes, 332 yards, 5 touchdowns. Great. The Frosh Stephen Carr can find a hole and hopefully pick up a blitz. But when you're talking about a Heisman contending quarterback missing his favorite receiving targets, not 1, but 2, that even with solid replacements, there has to be a downgrade from USC given that circumstance. This is an injury report worth watching as the week progresses. Pay attention to those top 2 USC receivers. If they don't suit up, I don't think the markets will adjust as much as they probably should.
All right, money time, play of the day. Back to Miami and Duke, the first game of the doubleheader Friday. We told you earlier that the last 2 trips to Duke, Miami has struggled. Tell them more about it, Teddy.
Sure. Last trip to Duke, we talked about it earlier in the show, a 3-point Hurricanes win. The trip before that to Duke, an 18-point Hurricanes loss. I like this Duke offense. I like this Duke defense. I know they're young. They might be ready to pull the upset here. They don't need to for us to cash our ticket. Let's take game number 106, the Duke Blue Devils, plus 6.5, and expect them to keep it competitive against Miami throughout on Friday night. Duke plus the points. That's our play of the day.
All right, very good. Thursday, big game breakdown means college. Georgia, Tennessee, Clemson, Virginia Tech, Northwestern, Wisconsin, and Cal and Oregon. And we'll recap everything with only a couple days left in the regular season in Major League Baseball. We'll talk to you tomorrow on SportsBit. Betting Insight today at SBRPicks.com.